Let's break down the ending and post-credits scene of Spider-Man: Brand New Day and how it sets up Avengers, Doomsday, Secret Wars, the new X-Men movie, and Venom in the MCU. The final fight of the film expresses the movie's theme perfectly. In almost every Spider-Man story, Peter struggles to balance his life as Peter Parker with his duties as Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2 showed us what happens when he fully embraces his identity as Peter Parker. This movie shows us the inverse. What happens after 4 years of him just being Spider-Man? The spider starts to overtake his life and his body. His AI even says the arachnid DNA is overtaking his human DNA, making him more aggressive and less in control. Peter is surrounded by characters who reflect this same theme. Punisher shows what happens when you abandon your personal life for a crime-fighting crusade. Banner is someone trying to keep a monstrous side contained. And Jean Grey has great power but has never learned to use it responsibly. The point of the movie is that Peter has become so good at being Spider-Man that no ordinary villain could be a credible threat. Instead, the real threat is that he's a workaholic who has stopped looking after himself. Ironically, nobody remembers who he is except for his enemy, Jean Grey. She's the only person he can actually relate to. Jean is also someone who has abandoned any hope of a normal life. Symbolically, she lives through other people's bodies and memories. There's even a chance that when she kisses Peter through MJ's body, it's her very first kiss. In the climax, Damage Control is holding John at their facility on Roosevelt Island, which has extra significance for franchise fans since that's where the climax of the previous film was shot. All through the movie, Damage Control has slowly shown us how its original mission has become corrupted. Tony Stark co-founded the organization to mitigate damage from superhero battles, but over the past few years it's evolved into an agency far more focused on control. First, they appropriated Stark drones in No Way Home and used them against Kamala Khan in Ms. Marvel. Now in this movie, they use Jean's telepathic powers to mind control people. The head of Damage Control is William Stryker, an X-Men villain from the comics who works with the government to help oppress mutant kind. In this film, he experiments on Jean's sister to steal her powers, experiments that end up killing her before they're finished, which is why he's now kidnapped Jean to finish the job. Spider-Man's biggest weakness is his secret identity. Once that information falls into the wrong hands, the people he cares about are put in danger. Jean has two turning points in the climax. First, she sees a torn vent that reads part of a word, her sister's dying thought, and realizes Damage Control tortured and killed her sister. The trauma of this knowledge triggers her powers to grow, and we see exactly how strong she really is, controlling a huge section of Manhattan and holding everyone in place with telekinesis. Peter is given two options: beat her the Punisher way with violence or reach her the Peter Parker way with empathy. He chooses empathy, opening up to someone and inviting her into his mind for the first time in the film. He shows her a memory of himself talking to Aunt May shortly after she discovered his secret identity, with May comforting him through the changes and reminding him that having powers doesn't make him any less himself. Then, in a striking moment, Jean is suddenly sitting in Peter's place in the memory. May's words are now for both of them. We love you because we're you, and knowing that is the greatest responsibility. For Peter, this moment becomes something to hold on to going forward. For Jean, it's the first time she's experienced real empathy instead of just reading someone's thoughts. She gets to feel what someone feels. She's spent the whole movie refusing to let herself relate to anyone since her sister's death. Here, she and Peter finally recognize they've both lost people, and both lost sight of why they're fighting. Peter then takes a bullet to save her life, and she returns the favor using her powers to keep him alive. When Peter leaves the hospital, he walks into a crowd cheering for Spider-Man, people who have no idea who he actually is. In this moment, Peter is finally able to separate his two identities. Spider-Man matters, and he's the hero of New York. But it's also possible for Peter to walk away and live a normal life. All through the movie, Peter has been buying flowers for Aunt May's grave to honor the dead. That changes in the party scene when he brings flowers to the living, Ned and MJ. He's about to buy more flowers for May's grave when he spots Ned in the deli and decides to reintroduce himself as Peter without the mask. When Peter shakes Ned's hand, it naturally turns into their old handshake from Homecoming. Ned looks confused at first, as if his hand is moving on its own. By the end of the handshake, the visual effect representing the memory spell fades, and Ned says, "Peter," as the film cuts to black, in keeping with the tradition of other MCU Spider-Man films ending on a cliffhanger. The implication is that Ned has some kind of magical sensitivity. He was able to use a sling ring in No Way Home, and his grandmother once told him he was special. The handshake may have worked like a kind of muscle memory ritual that broke through the memory spell because of that latent ability. MJ doesn't get her memory back. Going forward, MJ refers to her past self as a different person, telling Peter she isn't who he wants her to be, while Peter reassures her that who she is now isn't so bad. There's a reasonable case that future films should let this stand rather than rushing to restore her memory, since Peter and MJ getting back together too easily would remove a lot of potential story conflict, similar to what happened after their marriage in the comics. It's possible Jean's telepathic abilities could eventually be used to restore MJ's memories in a later film if the story calls for it. This movie ends with Jean on the run. Damage Control knows who she is, and they'll keep looking for her. A news report says Stryker has been ousted from his job, but that just means a new leader will take over, possibly someone with an even more anti-mutant stance, such as Henry Peter Gierich, a recurring government antagonist to the X-Men in the comics. Damage Control has slowly become a more threatening organization. It started as a government agency with broad duties, but the wrong people in charge steadily expanded its funding and jurisdiction. In Wonder Man, we saw its main goal shift toward arresting more people with powers simply to justify its own existence, including holding people without trial. As mutants start appearing more widely, Damage Control is positioned to expand further. It's plausible the government responds with a Mutant Registration Act, or even a declared state of emergency, and that Damage Control eventually gets rebranded as a Mutant Control Agency, with Stark's Iron Legion repurposed as Sentinels. Notably, Peter's inhibitor chip technology, created in this movie, could end up being repurposed by Damage Control as the power-dampening collars later seen in Days of Future Past, laying groundwork for anti-mutant bigotry. Since Stryker is on the run, it's possible a future shape-shifting villain reveal ties him to Mr. Sinister, Nathaniel Essex, a classic X-Men villain not yet seen in live action, who is obsessed with the genetics of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. It looks like Charles Xavier will form his school as a sanctuary against government overreach. In the comics, Jean was Xavier's first student, and he helped her control her telepathic abilities after her sister's death triggered them, closely mirroring what happens to her in this film's third act. She may again become his first student, helping him gather future X-Men. In the comics, Jean is one of the most powerful mutants on Earth, and her powers grow over time through trauma rather than a sudden secondary mutation. Notably, this film doesn't give her the classic Phoenix visual effects, which fits, since in the comics, the Phoenix Force is drawn to her specifically because of how powerful she already is. Given what happens to her in this movie, it's likely Jean will be wary of losing control of her powers again going forward, which sets up exactly the kind of vulnerability the Phoenix Force could later exploit. In the 2015 Secret Wars comic, Doom collects the remnants of the multiverse and remakes them into Battleworld, ruling as God Emperor. Crucially, no one remembers the universe before except a select group who survive aboard a space ark built by Reed Richards. There's speculation the films could adapt this idea with different characters aboard the ship, possibly including Jean Grey, since a telepath would be valuable if everyone's memories have been wiped. In the post-credits scene, Ned's Spider Tracker software searches for the hero and can't find a sighting anywhere in New York until the view pulls out into space where it reads, "Location found." Since Ned isn't tracking Peter directly, the only way someone in space could report a sighting is if Peter himself is using the app to signal Ned that he's safe. This suggests Peter is in space by the end of Avengers, Doomsday, even without an announced role in that film's main cast, consistent with Yelena's stated view in this movie that some problems are Spider-Man problems and some are Avengers problems, meaning she wouldn't necessarily call on Peter. It's plausible that in Doomsday, Doom destroys the multiverse, and Reed's rocket serves as the Ark, saving a small group of variants, including Peter, who go on to remember the old universe in Secret Wars. There's also speculation that Doomsday will end with Doom revealed to have Tony Stark's face, which would make Peter's greatest enemy in Secret Wars someone wearing the face of his father figure. In the original Secret Wars comic, Peter obtains the black costume on Battleworld, which turns out to be the alien symbiote. Given how influential that story has been on past Spider-Man films, it's likely the black suit will be introduced this way again. This also ties into Captain Jean DeWolff, a character introduced in this movie. In the comics, DeWolff is a close ally of Spider-Man who is murdered. A reporter named Eddie Brock wrongly believes he's caught her killer, and when Spider-Man proves him wrong, it destroys Brock's career. Brock then swears revenge on Spider-Man, which is the same grudge that leads him to bond with the symbiote after Peter rejects it. Between DeWolff's introduction and the strong parallels to the Secret Wars comic, this movie appears to be laying the groundwork for a black suit storyline followed by a Spider-Man versus Venom film. Notably, Damage Control has also developed sonic weapons in this movie, likely adapted from the cannons used against the Hulk in The Incredible Hulk. Technology that could later be repurposed against Venom, since sound is one of his key weaknesses. That's everything this film appears to be setting up heading into Avengers, Doomsday, Secret Wars, the new X-Men film, and Venom.